First of all, Madam Chair, I want to thank you for having this hearing and our ranking member, Mr. Doyle. This question of rural broadband and infrastructure in rural areas is like incredibly important. And Mr. Latta and I, working together on the Rural Caucus, know that. And I want to just say a couple of things. Number one, this is important not just for rural America. Rural America is on the ropes. I mean, commodity prices are down, whether it's in coal country or it's dairy country, farm country. And rural America is vital for the strength of all of America. And we believe that or we don't. But what's strong about rural America is when it has a solid local economy, the folks who have values of family, of community, of service, of building up the local fire department, of serving on the local bank, they have an economy that can work for them, and they have that community cohesion that I believe this country needs. And that's true whether you're in Vermont, or you're in Ohio or Texas. Rural America matters. We cannot have rural America without full commitment to the tools it needs to be successful. We've got some folks from Vermont here. We've got a company that absolutely is dependent on the infrastructure of the broadband. And the question for us, we agree on that in this committee. And you've been providing leadership on this. But I also think we've got to get serious on this where we get a commitment to real funding in real policies that are going to give these folks who are here and are committed to rural America an opportunity to be successful on behalf of the people we represent. So we've got to get moving on this, and it's not going to happen on its own. If we need regulatory changes, we need investment money with public policy. My view, we've got to do it. We're not getting it done. We don't even have an infrastructure plan before us to consider in Congress. And I think our committee should be taking the lead on conveying a sense of urgency that we've got to get moving. Now, I just want to ask, I'll start with you, Mr. Carlson. How would you define broadband that would be, in the spirit of the 1996 Act, relatively comparable, reasonably comparable to what we have in urban areas?
Well, I can speak to mobile broadband. A recent study came out. It was dated the middle of last year, so it's already a little bit obsolete, right, but not significantly obsolete. And that showed that in urban America, across all of America, that the broadband speeds, the mobile broadband speeds now are at 12.5 megabits per second.
I'm going to ask you to speak a little more.
12.5 megabits per second. And as I indicated, I think those are growing about 15% a year. So by the time the Mobility Fund 2 auction is concluded, you should anticipate that that standard across America, which includes rural areas, so urban areas are higher, is probably going to be 15 megabits per second. Megabits per second. So any area that is significantly lower than that is going to be substandard.
Okay, Ms. Hovis, thank you. We've got to get an agreement on what the goal is. Ms. Hovis?
When I think about this infrastructure, wired or wireless, a lot of it, in my experience, just comes back to fiber optics. None of this mobility, none of this wireless, and certainly not 5G is possible without fiber optics. So I guess my answer to you, Congressman, is that whether it's a metropolitan area or a rural area, we need as much fiber infrastructure as possible because faster wireless speeds won't be possible unless we have the fiber. And the greatly escalating speeds on the wireline side in metro areas, we're moving toward gigabit speeds in certain markets.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there. Just a few quick words. I only have 40 seconds left, starting with you, Mr. Murray, and going down to Mr. Connor, Mr. Berry. Success, your definition for rural America.
I completely agree with the need for fiber. One thought I had, and it's just in its infancy, is I'm hearing from everybody we don't know, there aren't good standards. There isn't good knowledge of what the coverage ought to be. Maybe what Congress should do. You're saying how can Congress help? Maybe what Congress should do is insist that localities have better maps. Do the mapping that they, for whatever reason, need to report back up to where their infrastructure is. is. And that may be a way to get better maps. Without good maps, you can't tell where the problems are. The issue I have is maps of tower sites. I get into a county and they say, well, where are the other towers? And I say,
Thank
you're the
you.
county.
My time is up, but I thank you, and I yield back.